It was a dark, lonely road on a fateful night, with silence broken only by the flashing lights of emergency vehicles and the tense murmurs of shocked bystanders. A tragic accident had shattered the quiet, leaving a scene of chaos and despair. Amid the confusion, one could never have imagined who would pull over and step out of the shadows, none other than Elvis Presley himself. Without hesitation, the king of rock and roll entered the scene, his presence immediately stirring shock and awe among the crowd. People stood frozen, trying to comprehend what they were witnessing. But it wasn't just his arrival that stunned those present. It was what he did next that would leave them speechless, a moment forever etched into their memories. Stick around, because the compassion and courage Elvis showed that night might just change how you see him forever. Number 5. Setting the scene. Elvis Presley, known to millions as the king of rock and roll, was celebrated not just for his electrifying performances, but for his genuine warmth and compassion toward people from all walks of life. Those close to him often spoke of how Elvis carried an unwavering kindness that extended well beyond the stage, whether he was offering support to a struggling fan, stopping to chat with strangers, or quietly helping those in need. He had a way of making anyone feel seen and valued, his natural empathy shining through in small, everyday moments. This authenticity wasn't just a public persona, it was a fundamental part of who he was, deeply rooted in his character. That same authenticity was on full display one fateful night when Elvis found himself driving along a dark, rural stretch of road, accompanied by a close friend. They were on their way back from an outing, sharing stories and laughter, when something suddenly caught Elvis's eye, a horrific car accident on the side of the road. The scene was grim, a stark reminder of how quickly things can take a turn, and without a second thought, Elvis made a snap decision. Despite the late hour, he asked his friend to stop the car, insisting they check on those involved. It was a characteristic impulse from a man who couldn't turn a blind eye to someone in distress. Elvis's cousin, Billy Smith, later recalled how this compassionate drive was ingrained in him from an early age. Elvis had this instinct. If someone needed help, he was there, no questions asked, Billy remembered. I can't tell you how many times he'd stop for someone who was stranded or having car trouble. To those who knew him, Elvis's actions that night were not out of character, but to the onlookers at the scene, it was nothing short of incredible. There he was, one of the most famous figures in the world, humbly offering his time and support to complete strangers in their hour of need. But what happened next would be something that no one there could ever have predicted. A moment so extraordinary that even those who witnessed it were left wondering if they'd imagined the whole thing. Number 4. Initial reactions at the accident scene. As Elvis stepped out of the car and approached the accident scene, there was a noticeable shift in the air. His movements were calm, yet filled with a sense of deep concern, as if he was instinctively tuned into the gravity of the situation. Despite the flashing lights, the chaotic sounds of emergency responders, and the murmur of onlookers, Elvis exuded a quiet, almost magnetic presence. Witnesses stood frozen, some whispering in disbelief. After all, this was Elvis Presley, the king himself, showing up not on a stage or at a grand event, but here, on a dark, isolated road, where tragedy had struck without warning. His unexpected arrival left people surprised, some even in awe, as he walked forward with a sense of purpose and compassion that instantly commanded respect. Elvis made his way over to the paramedics, who were diligently working to stabilize the victims. Without hesitating, he engaged with the first responders, asking if there was anything he could do to help. Amidst the crowd, he spotted a distraught woman who seemed overwhelmed by the sight before her. Gently, he approached her, offering a steadying hand on her shoulder. He spoke to her in a soft, reassuring tone, words intended to comfort and calm. Witnesses would later describe how the woman visibly relaxed under his touch, as if his very presence somehow lessened the weight of the tragedy unfolding before them. To Elvis, these actions were natural. He wasn't there for praise or acknowledgement, but because he simply couldn't stand by when others were in distress. One of the paramedics who witnessed the event later shared his impression, a memory etched vividly in his mind. "It was Elvis Presley, but he wasn't there for attention. He was there to help," he recounted, still amazed by the humility he observed in such a famous figure. For those at the scene, Elvis's unexpected appearance was one thing, but his heartfelt actions, his genuine willingness to comfort strangers in their darkest moments, left an impression far greater than any concert performance. As he stood there, his kindness and calm demeanor spoke volumes about who he truly was. Yet, this was only the beginning of an evening no one there would ever forget. What Elvis did next was something that would not only define this night, but would add an unforgettable chapter to the legend of the king. Number 3. Building the suspense. Even in the midst of such an intense and tragic scene, Elvis remained a steady presence, his calm demeanor radiating a quiet strength to those around him. Where others were gripped by shock, he moved with purpose and clarity, offering his support in a way that felt almost natural. Those who had been overcome by the horrors of the accident found a strange comfort in his presence, as if his gentle words and steady gaze somehow eased the chaos that surrounded them. For Elvis, this wasn't an act. His empathy was real, and it shone through in the way he focused entirely on those in need, providing a level of reassurance that words alone could never convey. As the night wore on, Elvis continued to move through the scene with a calm that brought a sense of hope amid the tragedy. He didn't seek the spotlight, didn't grandstand, but simply offered what he could. A comforting word here, a hand on the shoulder there, gestures small in action but profound in meaning. Witnesses would later say that his mere presence seemed to lessen the pain of that terrible night, as if the king himself had absorbed some of their suffering just by being there. He stood among them, a silent anchor in a sea of grief, and for those few moments, his calm brought them a sliver of peace in a world that suddenly felt broken. Elvis's close friend, George Klein, would later reflect on this incredible ability, saying, "Elvis had a way with people. He knew how to bring peace, even if only for a moment. It was a rare gift, one that wasn't learned, but rather something instinctual in him, a quiet understanding of human pain and a willingness to shoulder it, even if briefly." For those who knew Elvis, this night wasn't a surprise. It was a natural extension of who he was. But for those who saw him that night, it was as if he had brought with him a light, a reminder of goodness and empathy that stood in stark contrast to the tragedy surrounding them. And still, despite all he'd done to comfort those in need, Elvis had one more act left, a gesture that would etch this night into the memories of those who witnessed it forever. Number 2. The emotional impact of Elvis's actions. For those who witnessed that unforgettable night, the sight of Elvis Presley, not in a spotlight but in the darkness of a tragedy, left a lasting mark. They weren't moved simply because he was a world-famous icon, but because he was a man who saw suffering and chose to face it head-on. His decision to step out of his car and lend a hand, no fanfare, no entourage, just Elvis, was more than anyone could have anticipated. Here was someone who, in a world accustomed to idols being distant and untouchable, broke every barrier simply to be there for people in pain. The compassion he displayed resonated with the crowd on a level far deeper than his music or fame ever could. For the people at the scene, this night redefined Elvis in their eyes. They didn't see the rock and roll legend or the Hollywood star. They saw a compassionate soul whose heart extended far beyond the limelight. In that moment, he wasn't performing or posing for cameras. He was just a man compelled to help others in their darkest hour. Witnesses later described how profoundly this experience stayed with them, as if it uncovered a hidden truth about Elvis, one that had always been there, but was rarely seen so clearly. It was a side of him that wasn't part of his public persona, but was at the core of who he was. A man who cared deeply, unreservedly, and quietly for the people around him. Linda Thompson, who knew Elvis intimately, once spoke to this quality, saying, "Elvis was incredibly compassionate. That night wasn't an isolated moment. It was who he was." For those who loved him, this act of kindness wasn't surprising. It was simply another example of the kind of person he'd always been. He had a rare gift, not only for understanding others' pain, but for standing alongside them, even if only for a brief moment. In this quiet act, Elvis revealed the depth of his heart, showing that his legacy extended far beyond his music and fame, capturing the very spirit of compassion that defined him. This night, this simple yet extraordinary act left an indelible memory of a man who was truly there when it mattered most. Number 1. Reveal the main point. As the events of that night unfolded, the full extent of Elvis's selflessness became clear to everyone present. Not content with simply offering comfort from a distance, Elvis stayed until the situation was fully under control, checking in with victims and reassuring those in distress with his quiet, steady presence. When he learned that one of the families involved needed additional support, he discreetly took it upon himself to ensure they received the assistance they required, even going as far as covering certain expenses out of his own pocket. Witnesses watched in awe, realizing this was not just a fleeting act of goodwill, but a genuine outpouring of compassion. Elvis's kindness was so unaffected, so utterly unpretentious, that it almost shocked those around him. They couldn't believe that someone so revered, so universally adored, would humble himself in such a way, doing whatever he could to ease the suffering of strangers without a hint of ego. For Elvis, this was never about recognition or praise. It was simply the right thing to do. He didn't make grand gestures for the cameras or wait for applause. He acted because his heart compelled him to. His willingness to go out of his way for people who'd never expected to encounter him, much less receive his help, offered a rare glimpse of the man behind the fame. To him, kindness wasn't a choice. It was a duty he felt in his core, a responsibility to those around him. This night, so ordinary and tragic to those involved, became a testament to the depth of Elvis's character. He wasn't just the king of rock and roll. He was a man who walked through life with humility, driven by an innate kindness that quietly left its mark on everyone he encountered. This moment illuminated Elvis as so much more than a legend. It revealed the profound humanity of a man who cared deeply, even when the world wasn't watching. We'd love to hear from you. What do you think about this incredible side of Elvis, the compassionate man behind the legend? Do you have your own stories or favorite moments that show his kindness? Share your thoughts and opinions in the comments section below, and let's keep the conversation going about the remarkable legacy of Elvis Presley. We can't wait to hear what you have to say.